Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Zooming In with Conversations with Syed Affan and Mr. Brett Bourgon. I am Syed Affan and a proud father of three beautiful daughters, founder of my company, C2 Management Consultants, in 2019, last year. We are in a business of creating and driving value with consulting and business coaching. And today I have the honor to also introduce to you my dear friend and colleague, Mr. Brett Bourgon, who is RCC, CMA, CPA, and is the co-founder and president of Be Inspired Leadership Coaching and Be Inspired Finance Group in Canada. Now, Brett and I have been friends since 2017. We first met at a business coaching certification. And since then, we just simply couldn't get rid of each other, right? We have taught a number of different times how to collaborate with one another strategically. And only this year, believe it or not, for the first time ever, we have successfully found ways to collaborating during COVID-19. Isn't this wonderful, Brett? How are you today, sir?
I'm good, Sonny. You don't mind if I call you Sonny, do you?
No, I don't mind, because that's how people know me in Canada, right? I relocated since in Pakistan. People go by her full name, right? Yeah. So usually people call me here as Affan. So you can call me Affan if you can pronounce it that way, or you can keep calling me Sonny. That's perfectly fine.
I'll
whatever you call me, Brett. Don't call me late for dinner.
Well, with the time change, you're always seeming to be late for dinner. Since you, I don't think you ever sleep over there, man.
I know it's 1 a.m. It's past 1 a.m. right now here, and it's also the month of Ramadan for us, so it's going pretty good. We have managed to, pass first 10 days of Ramadan. It's usually 13 to 16 hours of fasting, depending on where you are in the world, and depending on when the sun comes out and when the sun sets, right? Yeah. So for us, it hasn't been that bad. So it teaches you a lot of discipline, right? And also it's a great way to build on one's spiritual self, right? It's all about the connection, right? So I think there are many number of different benefits. So again, it's not about me. I just wanted to remind ourselves, because we were having lots of different conversations beforehand. And I just wanted to mention this, that zooming into conversations like these is to find synergies and how do we create value for our customers and listeners out there, depending on where they are, whether they're in Canada or in Pakistan or anywhere in the world, right? So, and I think this was a prior reason for us to do this video, so that people can listen in, and hopefully they will find a lot of value from it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this. It's an interesting time, and you know, the most advanced organizations, or the organizations that are really going to come out of this very difficult time ahead, are the ones that can understand how to regroup and figure out how to become stronger. I mean, some of the better leaders of the past 20 years always looked at either a market transition or a difficult point in time to actually make the most out of it, and sometimes come out stronger than their competitors. So it's a time to differentiate yourself. It's a time, it's a difficult time. I won't discount that. Right. But it's a great time to regroup, reassess, and figure out how to be stronger coming out of this time than you were going into this time.
Right. So with this, perhaps, it's an opportunity for me to ask you a quick question here. How do you, what's this new world look like to you, right, going forward? What have you assessed?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I've been praising video adoption since 2004, with the adoption of WebEx coming out, and video just didn't take off back then. It's interesting that it took something like this global pandemic to put people into a place where they couldn't avoid, and they had to go onto video to collaborate remotely. So I find it interesting that the technology and a company like Zoom, for example, we're sitting here on Zoom today. Zoom wasn't around in 2004, but they came out with a better product, they figured out how to take out their competition beside them and just do it better. It became about the customer experience for them. So there's a great example of a company that came out with a product. They came in, it was just one of many different options. And during this pandemic, they have become the go-to way of people to communicate and collaborate and stay connected with each other, which is critical on a personal level and on a corporate level.
Right.
I find it, once again, companies like that and leaders that can find a way to actually come out with a better product, a better process, a better solution, and to really tie it into what we need. That's you could just see the benefits, and you could see the benefits that they're seeing.
Right. Absolutely. So, how do you personally plan ahead while other businesses are slow, right? As Be Inspired, since you've been in the entrepreneur yourself, since you left the corporate world, what is your strategy moving forward?
Yeah, it's interesting because our clients are all coming to us through really deep connections and deep relationships and referrals. And so when you're in that type of business, you've got to rely on almost like the technology to make sure that those connection points are still strong. So our vision hasn't changed. We're really looking to use the 40 model that NASA developed, that was developed for NASA, to be able to develop leaders in a nice, easy, structured way.
Right.
So we are still looking to take that model out to our clients and to the world, and people can use it both in a professional and a personal way. So that hasn't changed. I think what has changed is instead of running out and doing events with room full of 150 people, we're doing that through Zoom or through
Right.
chats like this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And it's no different for us either. I mean, somebody asked me this. How do I find opportunities within a crisis, or what would be my best take on it, right? So, and as I've observed through some of my client dealings, and that's one of the things I've learned many companies are doing right now. They're reaching out to their customers, with emails containing general wishes for health and safety or offers of different type of discounts, whatever they're offering, right? But think about it. Many companies are instead embodying the true spirit of this word called crisis, right?
Yeah.
Which happens to be a Chinese word, right? And as I was learning more about crisis when this COVID-19 began 6 or 7 weeks ago, first time in Pakistan when things started getting really serious around here. It's the word crisis is composed of two words, right? And first part is danger, and the other one is opportunity, right? So inside every crisis is danger, but also opportunity for creativity, or one could say resilience, right? And connection, right? So I said to one of my clients, I said, if you're just only reaching out to them with a phone conversation and just saying, hey, or on a WhatsApp or email only, for example, right? It depends. What is your body includes, right? What is it that you're communicating, right? So does it have the element of empathy in it, right?
Right.
Are you starting your conversations differently? Because it requires you to start your conversations differently now, right? You just kind of, it's like you're checking in with your family. It's no different. You're checking in with your customer either. So you might as well, because you don't know what they're going through right now, or what they have gone through in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks when you last spoke to them, right? So things can change and for that fast for anyone in particular. One of our quick discussions that we have had with somebody in our network, and they were describing a situation at the company where they have experienced a few people who were infected with this virus, and they've done everything to their best of abilities what they have in the past preparing for it. But now that it had hit them um, with this virus, the world has completely changed for themselves, right? And it's real, right?
Yeah.
It's no more a theory, it's no more a controversy. It's and actually a reality that we all are facing right now. Some of it calling it, it's a slow killer, right? As well as fast. Because look at today, the number of people infected with it are such and such, and number of deaths reported are such and such. But tomorrow it's going to be totally different picture. A week from now it's going to be totally different picture, right? So if companies, coming back to the companies conversation, if companies or any organizations can really see the opportunity in this crisis, it would be, in my opinion, how will they be able to give back to the communities, right? To differentiate themselves, right? To strengthen relationships with their customers, right? They can, I'm sure they can emerge pretty stronger, right? And probably perhaps be more creative and with more loyal and engaged customer base, right? So the current crisis, right, will end one day, no doubt, right? But how long it's going to take, who knows? But the relationships we make with our communities today, the opportunity that we have in our hands today, globally, and with our customers, right, that will endure, right? So that's what I said to him. I said, you know what? Focus has to be on caring. It has to be on, adapting. There are a number of things that we have started to do at home that we were not able to do before because we didn't simply have the opportunity to do that before because we were working, 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours a day, right? And now we have learned so much being at home that what else goes on in the beautiful life of my beautiful wife. So so basically only then I guess the idea is we will manage somehow to see the opportunity, right, in the danger only when we try to adapt. So it's the way I think the first lesson has been for all of us has been how do we adapt to work from home, because most of us were not ready to work from home, right? And so the first phase was, a couple of weeks into the COVID-19. I think they were all managing, companies were trying to manage in terms of getting their employees settled and work smoothly from home. So that was the first challenge. I think there are going to be, I'm sure, many challenges, but I think moving forward, one of the things is challenge everyone individually has been adaptation, right?
Yeah.
So with this, I think let's coming back to our topic, which is why did we collaborate together? And we collaborated because I think that the world needs solutions which can help them differently during this COVID-19 and moving forward post COVID-19. And I totally believe that because the world that we knew beforehand was different. So the challenges are going to be different. The workforce may or may not meet the same standards anymore. They may have great skill set, but there are going to be people required with some different skill set moving forward. So I think there's a learning opportunity for organizations now to do a lot more, and I think that will require different type of solutions and advices and counseling. Call it a consulting, right? Because how do we be able to help them? So I think that's one of the reasons together, you and I, we have decided to collaborate, because what you offer right now as part of your solutions is very unique. I totally believe that, because you and I, when we were at the coaching certification and we first learned about 4D consulting, the 4D model itself, the four-dimensional model, that added a lot of great value in our lives, right? Because we were able to learn about who we are, what dimensional we are, and what was it required from the assessment or a couple of the exercises that we were able to do. But later on, Brett, you took it on. You went a lot more further with this, and you decided to become a consultant with the 40 model. How did that happen?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, just to back it up a little bit, you mentioned the current environment. 40 was created because of what happened in NASA in the 80s. So NASA was humming along. It was coming up with some great innovation. It was coming up with some great success stories. And then Challenger happened, and they were wondering what happened. It was a technical error. It exploded. It turns out the communication errors and the leadership errors around managing Challenger were to blame. It wasn't the technical issue. It was basically the social context around the situation. People knew that those rings, they knew the temperature was too cold. There was too much pressure to launch. They launched, it blew up. It's a horrible tragedy. And after that, Dr. Charlie Pellerin, who created 4D, was in charge of Hubble, and Hubble was a telescope that was launched, and it was about $1.5 billion, and it was launched and it didn't work. So they looked back at the root cause of that, and they also said it was a leadership failure, and that was because of the communication issues between some of the contractors and NASA. And so when you look at it, what does failure look like for that organization back then? It was loss of lives, it was loss of credibility, and it was loss of billions of dollars.
Right.
Organizations today have their own definition of what failure looks like.
Right.
4D was designed and created to take away those failures going forward. And it was implemented at NASA. Dr. Pellerin put it out. And when you look at the number of missions and number of teams, thousands of teams that were trained on the 4D model and the 4D processes, it just really takes away that risk, and it also gives a model for a positive environment. So in NASA, sometimes no news is good news. We haven't heard anything come out of it since 4D was implemented for them many years ago. So that, once again, you talked about the coaching piece, getting deeper into it, getting to meet Dr. Charlie Pellerin, myself, and getting to become now a 4D consultant. That really just adds multiple layers of what 4D can do. So we were coached on how to do it from one person's perspective. How do you actually build that out and look at the culture of the organization, the culture of your customers, so that you build a company that is in alignment to the customers? I think I gave you an example. If you walk into a car dealership looking for a nice Audi and your budget is $45,000, and they try to sell you a Rolls Royce for $550,000, there's a bit of a misalignment. They can tell you that's got the most advanced features ever made in a car, but that's not what you're looking for, right? So those misalignments can happen as well. So it's interesting to look at 4D from a personality, from an organization, from a culture, and also from a mapping from a customer perspective. Today, we'll have a quick look at what that model looks like.
Right, and I would love to hear more and also for the sake of the audience, because it's a lot of them probably they're hearing something about 4D model for the very first time. So I think with further ado, I would like to you to elaborate a little bit more on the emotional intelligence side, if that's okay. How does 4D be able to lead into that? Because why I'm starting off there, because right now, emotional intelligence is going to play a huge role with any organization, particularly whether here or globally anywhere, right? So that's a very interesting piece that we have learned about together in our coaching certification when we were going through. But I would like to learn that as well from you now, right? How would that lead to it? So yes, please.
Yeah. So, and even just to go back a little bit, the whole idea that we're looking at is how do you create an environment where you have high performing teams?
Right.
And so the way I look at high performing teams, they built on a foundation of trust and learning. And then once you get that trust and learning, you can then work on the organizational EQ and emotional intelligence that you just called out. So when you
Mm-hmm.
look at that, you go, okay, well, that sounds great, but what is it and how do you get there? That's something that we'll take a quick look at when we dive into it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Once you kind of understand the 4 pillars of EQ, then you can then start looking at individuals and optimizing their strengths. Too often in leadership coaching, you've seen this as well. You look at maybe a couple things people aren't doing great. You look at their weaknesses and try to fix them. The best way, I mean, Strength Finders, there's many other great leadership systems. This is one of them. Really focusing on the strengths of your individuals and how they can add and contribute to the team is the best way to build a high-performing team. How
Right.
those individuals then integrate together as a system and as a team and an organization, that's also a challenge, and that's also something that's really critical in creating those high-performing teams. And then you look at it and go, well, what are these 8 behaviors of 40 leadership? Well, those are habits and behaviors that really can help give a structure to be able to execute on this. And I tell you before, you can run assessments and team assessments and individual assessments that tells you exactly where you start from and tells you what you need to work on. So it's a nice structured way of looking at how to
Mm-hmm.
create a high performing team. So I look at this and say, how to do this? Well, 40 models a way of doing that.
Right.
And this goes back to your other question, what is emotional intelligence from a detail perspective? And as you can see, it's really a 4-quadrant view. There's other views that have another kind of lens to it. But the way I look at it is self-recognition and that self-awareness piece is that first block. So
Mm-hmm.
we use 4D to help people with their self-awareness, to understand
Right.
really the operating system that drives their innate personalities and their themselves. So the psychology behind it really is something that if you aren't self-aware, you're not sure really how to manage yourself. So
Right.
that emotional self-awareness, figuring out that self-confidence because you know who you are and you know how to manage yourself, that's that
Right.
lead to the second one. So self-management is really how you regulate yourself, how you control yourself. And there's ways that people have said this before, that people know how to control their emotions or they don't. Self-management is a number of different things. So you could build trust.
Right.
This is really the part that you're regulating yourself to a way that really helps your emotional intelligence journey.
Right. One of the, if I can add one thing that just came to my mind, Fred, I was reading a recent article, and it talked about a Seattle-based company called Gravity. So the CEO, Dan Price, is a little story about that, right? So I'll touch upon that. But, it was about how to lead really in uncertain times, right? So, you may think, since we're talking about emotional intelligence, I think that's an important piece that I saw a relationship between the two. You may think that your role as a leader or has, little to do with how that affects the people who work with and for you, right? If that's the case, then, I humbly say that, if you are defining your leadership role that way, you're wrong, my friend, right?
Yeah.
So the role for as a leader is not to sugarcoat or sidestep the truth, right? It's also not to predict the future either, but it's the role that will provide protected space for those who are leading to feel confident, that will be that they will be cared, and best protected, right, from the implications of uncertainty. So this CEO Dan Price, what he did, because he had to cut 20% of his people, or the other choice was for him to go bankrupt, right? So he had this brilliant idea. So what he did, he decided, him and the CEO decided to ask employees for help. So what they followed was a master class, right, in emotional intelligence, and a major lesson in how to run a business in the face of difficult challenges. So Price called a company-wide meeting to let employees know the state of the business and solicit creative strategies for navigating the next few months. So him and the CEO of the company, they schedule 40-hour-long meetings with the small groups of employees to check in and gather ideas, right? So together, the Gravity team settled on unconventional strategy, and this was each person was given a form, right, that allowed them to privately express how much, if anything, that they could be able to sacrifice financially in terms of a pay cut, right? And according to Price, employees who had higher earnings, they generally gave up more, while lower paid employees, gave up less. But everyone in the company took a cut. But it's what I loved about this was that it didn't come from top to down, top to bottom. It was from bottom and up. Almost felt like a consensus building, right?
Yeah.
Building that trust piece, and at the same time of empathy, as you touched upon, right? So later, Dan Price wrote on his Twitter, and I quote, that we lost half our $4 million monthly revenue and had 4 to 6 months until bankruptcy. So when they told these to their employees, they volunteered pay cuts, and which will actually get them through 8 to 12 months with no layoffs, right? So I think Dan Price's approach to dealing with his company financials, showed evidence of brilliant emotional intelligence, right? The ability to identify, understand, and manage emotions, exactly what you just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it's that right hand side, that social piece. That's where the organization's in play, and you've called that empathy and organizational awareness of that empathy.
Right.
But even you called out a real hard skill and social skills with teamwork and collaboration and inspirational leadership. So if you don't have inspirational leadership, you're not going to have employees trying to help in a solution. So it's a great example of why that's important to an organization and how it can help. I mean, an interesting story came out today where one of the Amazon VPs resigned because he didn't think that the leadership at Amazon had enough empathy for their workers during COVID. He fought for some more protective gear, and some people lost their jobs when they protested on it. So it's great to see a senior VP stand up and show that organizational awareness and empathy for those around them, and stand up for a better cause other than one of the highest performing stocks on the stock market right now. So it's great to see that human element come out in parts of the organizations, even if the leadership didn't do it.
So how does an organization acquire emotional intelligence?
Yeah, so I mean, the way we do it as 4D consultants is really look at it from the 4D model, and you could see I brought it up on the screen here, and there's a lot on this thing, but we'll walk through it. It's how NASA builds teams. It's how they basically changed how they did things from a leadership perspective, and this is where Dr. Charlie Pellerin has designed a model that any organization can take this model and improve their culture, improve the way they operate, improve their employee satisfaction. It's measurable, so it's not just, I guess, as you would say, lip service. You can actually put a stake in the ground and measure it through tools, and then remeasure, because that's the whole idea. Is you want to see an ROI on your investment, you want to see improvements, and you want to see real comments from people on the team that the organization's moving in a great direction. So looking at the bottom left, that personality piece, we kind of touched on that a little bit.
Right.
And really that's your innate personality preference. People prefer certain things. You have an iOS, I have an iOS. It's what runs our body and the psychology behind it. We prefer certain things. On the left-hand side of these 4 dimensions you see here, cultivating and including, those are 2 based on preferring people and emotions over the right-hand side, which is the task base and focused on process. So people will have those preferences. You run a 40 individual personality test, it'll tell you which one you prefer. On the top to bottom, it's whether you have intuition or prefer information, process information based on intuition or based on sensing. And so the combination of that will put you in one of these dimensions. And then the nice thing about this model versus, I'd say, Myers-Briggs, Myers-Briggs, you'll learn about yourself. It also has intuitive versus sense, but it also seems to peg people and say, good luck and deal with it.
Right.
This is a model for leadership growth. So if you end up in the including area, it's not good luck and deal with it. There's some self-awareness journey that you'll learn through that, which is, of course, the first step in EQ. And your question was, how do you use 40 model to build your EQ? Well, your self-awareness is the first part of it. You learn what it means from an including area. You learn your strengths. You learn the things that are what we call shadows, or things that are your blind spots that you need to be aware of. And then you can make better decisions once you know what those are. But the real power of this is then you know what your growth plan is. If you are in the including area, you really prefer collaboration. What about relationships, which is the cultivating area? What about strategy, which is in the visioning area? What about process and execution, which is the directing? So once again, it doesn't matter what dimension you innately prefer to operate in. The real critical part is the growth plan, and really figuring out as a leader how you can add all 4 dimensions into your leadership journey. So when you look at the build on the left, that personality part clearly ties right into EQ, and it ties right into that self-awareness piece, which is always the start of your EQ journey. On top of that, the combination, because you're normally in organizations not by yourself, the combination is how you start getting into culture and team mindset. There's a culture in an organization sometimes based on the product it sells. So clearly a not-for-profit would be more kind of a cultivating type of organization, whereas a very heavy sales engine would be more of a directing in an orange organization. If you're building products that no one's ever seen before, you'd be a visioning type organization. And if you're really into partnerships and collaboration, it's a yellow type organization. So knowing the culture of your organization, and looking at how the different teams work and the different personality blends, that's how you start to build out a real plan and a real map. And that's that can be, once again, NASA, that can be a heavy sales organization, that can be any type of company that you can think of. The model works.
You know, somebody asked me this question. Actually, this wasn't a question. Somebody mentioning their state of their organization as part of their culture, that they have certain employees who have been there for the past 25, 30, 35 years, right? So they've hired the newbies, the young blood into the company, and one of the key challenges that they've been facing is, as part of the succession planning, is that because of these employees who have been in their companies for a very long time, they feel insecure, right? And because of their insecurity, they don't want to be a part of any type of succession planning. They don't want to teach. They don't want to create their replacement, if you will, right? And HR is kind of left alone for them to come up with a solution, right? What do they do with it? So do you think something like that, as an example, can be addressed from the perspective of 4D? Could you please shed some light on that?
Yeah, I mean, once you build a model and the understanding, you look at that storyline and emotion layer. Those are really kind of positive and negative storylines, otherwise known as kind of green and red. Where an example of a red storyline in that example would be, these new kids are here to take my job, and I don't know, all they really want to do is make me retire, and I've given my life to this company. I mean, you could just feel the emotions behind that statement. Versus green would be, hey, it's great to get some help over here. I've been here a long time. Maybe I can help teach these new folks how to be,
Right.
really how to be a strong contributing member of the team. So you can see that the exact same situations, you can run those two different storylines. One leads to a positive culture, and one would lead to more of a toxic culture, because you've got people
Right.
kind of digging in, protecting their turf, judging those around, instead of kind of being supportive and collaborative.
Right. So that's a great segue, I think, for any organization to has an opportunity with this 4D, right? Regardless what the situation might be. And part of the problem here, what I've seen as a challenge is most of the organizations, they've been quite used to using for example, a coaching solution, right? So, for example, or training solution, right? So somebody would come in and consult them with, they would analyze the organization from their own perspective, and they would suggest few items, and it will be left alone, right? So I think with the 4D, there's an opportunity, because companies can be able to find where they are in a process, right? Because they can be able to assess themselves, right?
Yeah, the key is
And
to really assess against those 8 behaviors that you see on the right, as in,
right,
express authentic appreciation, address shared interests, keeping all your agreements, appropriately include others,
right,
expressing reality-based optimism,
right,
100% committed to the job,
right,
clarifying roles, accountability, and authority, and resisting blaming and complaining. And those things can be measured and remeasured, which is something that's critical, because I think, to your point, if you just take a training session and leave it alone, it's going to be
hmm
lost. Most training sessions are lost within 4 to 5 weeks at best, sometimes 3 to 4 days. So
right.
the behaviors to become habits, that's the real part where the model gets sticky and the culture can really change.
Right. That's what we also tell all the time, and share this with anybody in particularly. That is consistency, frequency, and repetitiveness. Right. That's going to be the key moving forward. Doesn't matter what you do, whether you're in sports or you're dealing with any of your personal life matters, or if it's regarding your health. It's if you're not consistent, or you're consistent but you're not frequent, but you are the other two. It has to be the combination of all three, right? So
Right.
that's why I loved your style of consulting as well, because I think, and that's what we need here in Pakistan, right? Because we need um, expertise for group facilitations, where you could be able to not just come in on one point in time. You have a number of different sessions, so we can be able to create this value for different organizations, where there are a number of group meetings, group sessions, and you're creating value, right? And you're trying to be able to assess where they are now and where they're heading. Is it the roadmap that they have decided for themselves? Is it the roadmap they have decided to walk on? Is it really the direction that they are truly following or not, right? If we can help them, we can help them, right? And we can support them to get where they wanted to. So absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Pellerin's a pretty smart guy. He developed this and didn't really leave any holes at all. I mean, you can have 4D test out any situation in professional life or in personal life, and it always fits. Just I heard somebody last week talk about, well, I know it's COVID, but I still would have been happy and invited to this virtual coffee meeting. I could have gone through the drive-through at Tim Hortons, because of course it's Canada. So there's an old Canada reference for you. Go through Timmy's, sit and join the Zoom meeting, and so they felt excluded, right? So just that one feeling of not being involved in that one meeting shows that appropriately including others as a real key leadership thing, that under including people and not having them excluded, and just even the smallest things as a social contact and social meeting right now, that can negatively impact relationships.
You're absolutely right.
And the
Absolutely
other
right.
thing, I mean, you picture leadership teams that are sitting in a room doing strategy, and if you were thinking you should be in that room, it's a hard relationship to really repair after being under included in that area. On the flip side, if I included you at every conference call and every meeting and everything from a business development perspective that Be Inspired was doing, you'd probably say that's a little bit over including. I don't need to be in there and I don't have all that time, and it actually would drain my energy in the other way where you're including me in too much stuff. So that's why that's one little example of all these real life situations apply to each of these 8 core leadership behaviors.
So that's great points that you've just touched upon, right? And that's what I love about 4D, right? So, the one thing that comes to my mind is the person's individual state of mind, right? Their individual needs versus their emotions, right? So, can you elaborate a little bit more how 4D can be able to address that, keeping the person's emotional and individual needs in check?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the personality types were defined with Carl Jung's personality types, and we've covered those off. But I think what I like about it, it also maps to Maslow's needs hierarchy.
Right.
And so you can see that feeling valued, feeling included, having a hopeful future, and responsibility. When you look at it as all of us need to feel appreciated. We all need to feel like we belong to something. We all need hopeful futures, and we all need the ability to respond and be responsible. Those are how 4D maps into that needs hierarchy. And when you look at it from a motivation perspective and a performance perspective, if you have those blocks and even use that in a flow, you're going to have somebody who feels motivated. You're going to have somebody performing at the highest level. A lot of organizations that fail to have great cultures and great high-performing teams go right to the directing area. You might have been in one of those situations in the past, I mean, when someone goes, just do your job. That's right directly to orange. And what you're missing are the 2 core emotional needs and even a logical need. People need to know why they're doing things to feel motivated. You need to feel valued. A lot of times companies will run these pulse surveys, and the employee, they send them out. It always comes back with reward and recognition can do better. Companies don't do this core need, which is a foundation of everything else, well. Feeling included, I mean, we can talk about tribal leadership. We could all talk about how people need to feel like you belong to something, some more than others. If you're naturally in the including area, you really need this to be a core part of you. But that is the next level, and that's an emotional need we all need. The hopeful future, once again, you have to know you're actually headed in a direction and what that direction is. From a company perspective, that's really making sure that you understand the strategy and the vision of where the company is going. And you got to be able to be responsible. You have to be able to have that ability to own things, to lead things, and to feel like that is something that you've done to the company in a positive way. So it's neat how it ties right into Maslow really cleanly.
That makes sense. There was a post that I saw. Somebody posted this on LinkedIn, and they said, when this COVID-19 started, he said, "Hey, I wonder how all the micromanagers are doing." Right?
Yeah.
Good luck to you. Right? Exactly. So, thinking about those micromanagers, this is I'm sure they have had their own challenges, right? And they've been, in those dramatic states of their own minds, right? What do I do now? I disappeared. I lost track of having a visibility of 10 of my subordinates who I used to see directly from my office's window, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why we call out trust as that first foundation of a great team, which pointing out is a lack of trust there. So for those who are watching this and are looking for other reasons and ways of looking at helping organizations and cultures improve, these are how individuals will feel if they're in this area. So if you're naturally a cultivator, you'll feel like a victim, and you will say things like, there's nothing I could do, therefore you don't do anything. The includers will actually try to rescue, and that rescuer state is a state that is a drama state that's also can lead into these toxic culture environments. They regret it. It saps their energy. They feel like they're kind of jumping to everyone's rescue, even though it's, once again, they kind of feel good about it, but they also feel at that point that it shouldn't be required. The visioning folks rationalize that it doesn't matter, so that, you know, they feel fatigued and they repress these uncomfortable feelings because they don't think, as you say, the hopeful future. It doesn't really seem like they're going in any direction. And then in the directing folks, and, you know, micromanagers can be in this area, of course, it's a blamer. It's their fault. There's no accountability. You know, great leaders take accountability for their actions. If you're in a toxic environment, or if you're in a kind of a stressful state, you won't take accountability. You'll look for somebody to take the blame for it.
Right. Okay.
Well, that's all I have today from a content perspective, Sonny. I hope the 40 overview at least gave you a view of how powerful the system can be. Once again, it's a great structure that can be applied to any organization. It's a great way of, it's a measurable tool, so you can actually benchmark and put a stake in the ground so that you know your starting point and you know your development point. It's a tool that you know what your innate preference is, but you also then work on a development plan so you become this multi-dimensional leader. That's what leadership is all about. You know how to do relationships, you know how to do teams, you know how to do vision and strategy, and you know how to execute.
So thank you very much, Brett, for sharing the great content with us. Again, 40 model is of great value for us. It has been, and hopefully it will be a great value for everybody. And with this, I'd like to end our conversation and wrap it up with this message quickly for anybody who's watching it from an organizational perspective. If there's anything that we can be able to do for you and add value for your organization, feel free to reach out. And Brett and I would be happy to do this together with you. And I'd like to thank you all for taking the time out to listen into our conversations, and we look forward to hearing from you. So thanks, Brett.
Thank you.
Hope you're doing great in Canada. You're still wearing the sweater, so obviously the spring is on.
Spring is on, summer is not yet. So
summer is not here.
We'll get some warmer weather soon. But anyway, it was a great chat.
Right.
To you, Sonny. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Brett. We'll catch up. Take care.
Bye.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.